Part 2. Temporary People. The things that never can come back are several. Childhood, some forms of hope, the dead. Emily Dickinson, 1830 to 1886. Chapter 31. I did not take flight with Auntie Liang that night. Even as I reached up to her, she changed into a cloud of tiny butterflies that dissolved in the night. I wanted to cry, but I was too weak. Sometime later, I'd lost count of the days and nights. The door opened, and someone gasped. "What's going on here?" I managed to open my eyes, and as my vision cleared, I recognized the familiar face of one of Papa's close colleagues, Professor Wang Yi-chuan. I'd last seen him imprisoned in the cowshed with Papa. He hurried from the room and returned a few minutes later with Comrade Pen. Why was this child left alone?" Professor Wang asked angrily. "Oh, we had no idea she was sick," Comrade Pen answered. "We know her father is a rightist, Comrade Pen, but what crime has this little girl committed?" Professor Wang demanded. "Why are you letting her die on your floor? Where is your heart?" Comrade Pen's voice was suddenly soft and solicitous. We will take her to the hospital," she said, and left the room. Professor Wang knelt beside me. He took my hand in his and whispered, "It's going to be all right, Yi-Mao." Comrade Pen returned and said, "Army Representative Zhang Xin has given us permission to use his car, Professor Wang. It's here now. Let's go." Professor Wang pulled away my soiled sheet and picked me up and carried me outside to the car. After laying me across the back seat, he said, "I have to go now, Yi-Mao. I am sorry." Comrade Pen climbed into the front seat next to the driver. As the car pulled into the street, I felt as if my insides were being shredded. The road was in disrepair, and as the car bounced up and down, I wanted to tell the driver it was killing me, yet my lips could form no words. My tongue lay dry as paper in my mouth. We stopped outside the city hospital. The driver carried me inside. We passed through a thick confusion of stretchers and beds and crying children, of IV bottles and people lying on the floor, moaning or sitting against the walls, smoking or walking up and down the halls, looking dazed and lost. I was carried into a room where a doctor examined me. "She is as good as dead," he said, and stepped back. There's nothing I can do. Anything I might try would just be a waste of my time. No, you must do something, Comrade Pan protested. Listen, the doctor responded impatiently. Stop this. Tell her family to prepare for her funeral. No, Comrade Pan answered. The doctor walked away. Comrade Pan told the driver to carry me back to the car. Half an hour later, we stopped outside a building. Comrade Pan went inside and returned with a man. Is this her? He asked. His voice was deep and rich. Yes, it is, Representative Zhang, Comrade Pan said. They would not admit her to the city hospital. They said she was beyond hope. Will you help her? The representative leaned over me, touched my forehead for a moment, pulled back my eyelid to see my eye, felt my pulse. He withdrew and stood outside the car for several seconds, saying nothing. Well, Comrade Pan asked imploringly, the PLA hospital is better than the city hospital, the representative said. But it is restricted to officers and their immediate relatives and soldiers. What's to be done? Comrade Pan asked. I could tell them I'm her father, the representative said. Wonderful, Comrade Pan sighed. I knew I could count on you. With that, she crawled into the back seat with me and shut the door. The representative got into the front seat. He gave directions to the driver. When we get there, he said, let me do the talking. The PLA Hospital 105. At PLA Hospital 105, the representative filled out admission forms affirming that he was my father and Comrade Pan was my mother. Attendants immediately wheeled me to an intensive care ward. As the doctor and nurse examined me, I opened my eyes. In the bright light, I could see the representative's face. He was a tall man, middle-aged, slim, confident in his manner. When he noticed me looking at him, he smiled and whispered, "It'll be all right now. No need to worry." I forced a hint of a smile and blinked once to let him know I had heard him. Like so much else in my life, this man's kindness was as inexplicable to me as the wickedness of so many others. The last time I had been this close to a soldier, he had hurt me. Now another soldier was posing as my father in order to save my life. Why? I understood neither. And Comrade Pan, who had never said a single kind word to me, who despised me because of my family background, was pretending to be my mother. I no longer had any idea what she might actually be thinking. So many adults around me seemed to be playing roles that changed dramatically in a moment. Their behavior was utterly unpredictable. I think it is spinal meningitis, the doctor said to the representative. I'm going to have to isolate your daughter from the other patients. Will she survive? Comrade Pan asked anxiously. I can't say, the doctor said. I watched the doctor take out a long needle. The nurse pulled me into a sitting position and lifted my shirt. The doctor inserted the needle and drew spinal fluid. He'd administered no anesthetic. The pain was excruciating. I let out a little squeak and struggled for a moment, but I was weak and easily restrained by the nurse. I was taken to a private room. The doctor prescribed several Chinese medicines and acupuncture to bring down my fever. Hour and hour I wasted away. Nothing seemed to work. Comrade Pan visited every day and sat silently beside my bed. One night, I awakened with a start and sat up in bed. My pain had vanished, and I seemed to have recovered my strength. The moon shone brightly through the window, bathing the room in a blue haze. I slipped to the floor and walked to the window. The courtyard below was empty. There was no sound and no movement. The world was like a dreamy, still life painting. As I gazed around, I felt my feet leave the floor. I rose through the air to the ceiling and floated there, face down. Looking at the room below me, in the bed beneath me, eyes closed, I saw a wasted little girl. In each of her arms was a needle attached to an ivy. She was as pale as the sheet covering her. Her breath was barely perceptible. I thought, poor little girl. I felt so sorry for her. I wanted to ease her suffering. I remembered something I'd learned in school. I began to speak to her. But the gentle voice from deep inside was not my own. It was a voice of Auntie Liang. It said, your life has not been a long one, little Yimao, but now it's over. There is nothing more for you in this world. You may leave it now. Come with me. The little girl didn't move. Did she hear me? I began to cry for her. I reached down, but could not quite touch her. I cried for her, and my tears fell like raindrops, splashing one after another on her face and hair. Her eyelids fluttered like butterfly wings. She blinked and stared up at me, hovering above her. Her hand moved toward mine, and our fingertips drew closer. At that moment, I descended like a feather toward her. Her arms encircled me. When our faces were nearly touching, we looked into each other's eyes, and she smiled. Our eyes blended, our fingers, hands, and arms flowed into each other. Our faces became one. Everything darkened. A few days earlier, Mama had set out to enroll Yiding in a school 8 miles from Gao village. As she and my brother neared the school, a stranger shouted behind them, "Li Kai, wait!" "What is it?" Mama said. "I was sent here by the leaders of Anhui University to find you," he said. "Because of the flood, I couldn't get in touch with you. Your daughter is very sick, and you have to go back to Hefei immediately." The temperature that summer day was well over 100 degrees. Mama and my brothers were exhausted by the humidity and heat when the messenger found them. Mama braced herself against her bicycle. "What's her illness?" she asked. "I don't know. I have not seen her," the messenger replied. He climbed onto his bicycle and rode away. Mama decided to drop Yiding off at school as planned. When she was satisfied that he would be cared for there, she said goodbye to him. On the way back to Gao village with Yicun, she pondered the problem of getting to Hefei quickly. A major flood occurred in the region in the previous week. Most of the roads were closed, and the train and the bus systems were disrupted. She was not feeling well, so she first proceeded to the commune clinic. As soon as she walked into the facility, she heard someone wailing. It was a cry that comes from deep within the soul, the sound of suffering that cannot be contained. The doctor in charge told Mama that an 11-year-old girl had just died of a lung infection. She didn't arrive in time to get effective treatment, he said. Mama looked through the open door at the 3 forlorn figures standing around a table on which lay the body of a little girl. The dead child was dressed in rags. The mother and father were holding each of her hands. A brother, about the age of my younger brother, clung to his mother, sobbing. Mama immediately thought of me in Hefei. She imagined at that moment I might be lying dead on a hospital table, just like this, but with no one beside me. She became both sad and desperate, and began praying under her breath. She prayed that God would hear her, and that He would save me, and that I would not suffer the fate of this poor little girl. She returned to Gao village and received permission from old Crab to leave after giving him a pack of cigarettes. The following morning, she put Yi-chun on her back and set out for Hefei. She waded across a shallow stream where the flood had washed out a bridge, past an abandoned bus stop, and walked 12 miles to another stop to catch another bus. In the adjacent county, she caught a train to Hefei and arrived at the child care center after midnight. Mama pounded on the door until Comrade Pan responded. "Where is my daughter?" she demanded. "What disease does she have?" "She's not here," Comrade Pan answered. "I took her to PLA Hospital 105 a week ago. The doctor don't know what her problem is." "Why? Why is she in the PLA hospital?" Mama asked. "The city hospital refused to admit her. The PLA representative for the university took her there. He said he was her father. I said I was her mother," Comrade Pan said. "That's how she got in." Mama was speechless at this revelation of compassion. The top university administrator had lied to get me admitted to the best hospital in the city, and Comrade Pan had assisted him. Comrade Pan led Mama to my room. Mama saw my mat on the floor. She saw books and papers from school and my shoes beside it. She concluded that I had been carried from the room because I was too sick to walk. She burst into tears. "I need to see her right now," she sobbed. "Impossible," Comrade Pan said. "You'll have to wait until the morning. You can stay here tonight." Early the next morning, Mama left Yi-chun with Comrade Pan and hurried to the hospital. At the western gate of the university, she ran into a colleague who was surprised to see her. "Your daughter is very sick," the colleague said. "We didn't think you'd make it here because of the flood." "What's her illness?" You didn't know?" the woman asked. "Oh, well," then she stopped and averted her eyes and hurried away. Mama concluded that she knew but would not say because it was so serious. Her anxiety intensified. Mama ran the rest of the way to Hospital 105. She burst in the door and hurried down the hall. A soldier stopped her and demanded to know who she was. "My daughter is here," she answered. "She's very sick. I'm from the countryside and I don't know where she is." "Go to the registration desk," he told her. "Find out what room she is in." At the registration desk, the receptionist went down the list of patients. "There's no one here with that name," she said. Mama went to the children's ward. She asked an attending nurse for me. "No one here by that name," the nurse said. She searched through the other departments, more desperate by the moment. Finally, she found her way to the contagious disease wing of the hospital. She went from room to room until at last, on the 3rd story, she found me alone in a room at the end of the hall. "Mama," she sobbed. please don't die, and rushed to my bedside. Mama, I whispered, is it really you? Yes, she said. She laid her face against mine and sobbed. A doctor came into the room and asked, who are you? No visitors are allowed at this hour. Please, leave. I'm her mother, Mama replied. I traveled all night to get here from the countryside. If you are her mother, the doctor said, then who is the other woman who claims to be her mother? Does this child have two mothers? That is Comrade Pen. She cared for my daughter until I could get here. And her father, the representative? Mama just shook her head. The doctor not only seemed to understand, he also seemed to sympathize. He walked to my bedside and began examining me. Mama stepped back to make room for him. What's the problem with my daughter? Mama asked. I did a spinal tap and ordered blood tests. The original diagnosis was meningitis, the doctor said, his voice gentle and empathetic. Now, I'm no longer sure what she has. I suspect she may have contracted typhoid fever. I treated her for it and she stabilized, but she still has a high temperature. Now, I believe she does not have typhoid fever. I'm still watching her and testing her, but I really can't yet give an accurate diagnosis. How serious is it now? Mama asked the doctor. She was fortunate they brought her here. She had a high fever for at least 10 days. She has not responded to treatment. To be honest with you, it's still touch and go, he said, but she has a chance now. I promise you, I'll do everything I can. He gave me a concerned look and left the room. Mama closed the door and returned to my bedside. After several minutes, she said, Mama, there is something I must do for you. What? You can never tell anyone, she said. Never. No matter what happens, you have to keep this a secret. If anyone found out, her voice choked with emotion, that would hurt us. Do you understand me? Yes, I said. I won't tell anyone. What are you going to do? I'm going to baptize you. Baptize? Yes, Mama. Your mama is a Christian. Your aunties and uncles in Tianjin are Christians too. I had never heard the word Christian before. I had no idea what she was telling me. If I do this, whatever happens to you from this morning on, someone will always be watching over you. You will never be alone. Are you going away, Mama? No. But I'm afraid you might, Mama, and I want someone to care for you and love you until I am with you again. I won't go away, Mama. I know, she said. I know. She dipped her fingers in the basin of water beside my bed and touched them to my forehead. She whispered something about mother and father and blessings, all the while crying. I watched and listened in wonder as she said in a low voice, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Mama, I asked, who are those people? Holy Mary, Mother of God, she continued, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. End of chapter 31. Chapter 32. My mother stayed with me in the hospital. My brother remained with Comrade Pan in the child care center. My fever continued for 3 days after she baptized me. On the morning of the 4th day, the fever finally broke. My desire for food returned. I told Mama I was hungry. If I bring you some watermelon, do you think you can eat it? She asked. Yes, I responded. I'd like that. Mama asked the doctor if she could give me watermelon, and he agreed it was a good idea. Mama found a nearby street market and bought a small watermelon. She cut it open and spooned out the juice and fed it to me. I was able to swallow several spoonfuls. On her 5th day in Hefei, Mama went to the university offices to make a request that my father be given permission to visit me in the hospital. Her request was denied. The doctor was delighted by my sudden dramatic improvement and announced I could leave the hospital. Mama borrowed a 2-wheeled cart and brought it to the hospital. A nurse helped her carry me outside and placed me on the wooden bed of the cart. Mama then wheeled me to our new quarters, a room in a dingy hostel provided to us by the university. The room was without a kitchen, bathroom, or running water. It had beds fashioned from unfinished wooden planks. In a room next to ours resided one of Mama's old colleagues, who had been in the cowshed with Papa. He took pity on us and gave us a few cooking utensils and a small coal-burning stove. Mama brought Yi-chun from the child care center to live with us. A few days later, Yi-ding arrived from the countryside. His school semester had been cancelled because of the extensive flooding. The 4 of us lived in the dark hostel room for the next 3 months, while I gradually recovered my strength. The conditions were crude. I heard Mama tell her colleague, yet they were superior to Gao village. During those days, Mama had to carry me to the bathroom. For a long time, I was so weak I could not stand. At the end of September 1969, the 4 of us went to Gaul village. Mama found a truck going that way and secured a ride for us. Mama and I rode in the cab with the driver, and my brothers rode in the back with some of our belongings. The ride was long and grueling, and the country roads deeply furrowed by the recent wet weather. Exhaust fumes flowed freely into the cab of the truck, and the driver smoked constantly. In a short time, I became sick to my stomach. I vomited in the cab, and the driver became angry and swore at me. After that, he drove with both windows down and often stuck his head out for fresh air. When we arrived near the village, I was weak and sick and sore. All my muscles ached. Carrying our bags, we walked across the countryside for a quarter of a mile. I was stunned by my first look at Gaul village. Filthy women and children adorned in rags approached us. The women helped my mother carry our luggage. The children stood around, gasping at me. I had never before seen children as dirty as this. None of them wore shoes. Everyone came with us as we proceeded through the village to a dilapidated shed. This is your new home, Mama said, opening the door and stepping inside. I followed her in. The crowd pushed from behind, and many of them entered the rickety structure with us. I was unpleasantly surprised. The walls were mud and the floor was dirt. Wood beams crossed overhead, and on them was piled straw for the roof. The ceiling was low. It was especially low for my mother, who was tall for a Chinese woman. At 5'7", she was about 6 inches taller than most men in the village. The structure, Mama explained, was previously the village warehouse, used to store rice, seed, and tools for the production team. Villagers had built a 4-foot-high mud wall down the middle to separate our living quarters from the storage area. In our quarter was one double bed. There was a clay stove just inside the door and a chamber pot in a corner of the room. In another corner was a large clay water jar. Our trunks were stacked against the wall. There was no electricity and no window. The only light came from the doorway. "Where will I sleep?" I asked Mama. "On the bed," she answered, pointing to the double bed. "We all sleep on this bed." The shed was filled with wide-eyed villagers watching our every move and listening to us as though we were a performing troupe. After looking over the room, I told Mama, "I think I need to go to the bathroom." "Where is it?" "I'll show you where to go," she said. She tore 2 pages from a notebook next to the stove and led me outside. A dozen steps away was a large open depression in the ground. As we approached it, I noticed that it seemed to be seething as if it were alive, and was making a loud buzzing sound, something like a dull, persistent stringed instrument. As we stepped closer, the entire surface began to rise, quickly, like black steam from a pot. I realized that this cloud ascending into the air was millions of black flies that fed on the surface of this sewage hole. Whenever anyone approached, they buzzed around overhead, then resettled when one left. Around the pool was a mud wall, about a foot high, but it had eroded in parts. The sewage pool itself was a circle of about 6 feet in diameter. At the edge were 2 bricks wedged in the dirt. Between them, at a sharp, sloping angle, were several other bricks that formed a trough into the black pool. Mama said, "You stand on this, turn your backside to the pool, squat, and relieve yourself. Put 1 foot on each outside brick. Be sure to relieve yourself on the middle bricks. If you relieve yourself directly into the pool, it will splash on you and the flies will follow you back inside." Mama helped me position myself. I was about to untie and lower my trousers when I realized that a dozen children and adults had followed us to the open latrine and were watching me with fascination. Mama asked the audience to leave, and when they had gone, she handed me the notebook pages. "We don't have a toilet paper ration here," she said. "This is how you do it. You crumple it up in your hand, then open it and crumple it again. Do this several times to soften it, and then it's comfortable to use." When I got back to the hut, I told Mama I needed to wash my hands. "The water is in the jar," she said, pointing to the large container in the corner. I lifted the wooden cover from it and stuck my hands in the water. Mama blurted out a plaintive "No!" She startled me, and I pulled my hands from the jar immediately. "That's our water supply," she said. Too late. She showed me the gourd ladle I was supposed to use to draw water from the jar, pour it into a basin, and wash my hands there. My carelessness had just contaminated our water. End of chapter 32.